What if the biggest archaeological finds aren't behind us, but still buried somewhere under our feet? Imagine, under the ancient ruins of Mesopotamia, beneath layers of sand and centuries of silence, there might be technologies that don't fit with what we think humans were capable of. Down in the deserts of southern Iraq, where the wind just keeps blowing across the bones of civilizations older than Christianity, you have to wonder, what's still hiding down there? Before we go any further, especially if you love stories that mix history with the impossible, hit like and subscribe. Seriously, if you're still awake as the night creeps in, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I like the idea of this story drifting through the night, crossing time zones, reaching people right on the edge of sleep. Let's start, not with some great discovery, but with a hole, a gap in what we know. In 1932, a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig was working in the basement of the National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad. He was surrounded by broken pottery and old bronze scraps when he noticed something strange. A clay jar, about the size of your fist, from the Parthian period, so somewhere between 250 BCE and 224 CE. Inside the jar, there was a copper cylinder, and inside that, an iron rod. The whole thing was sealed up with bitumen, the same tar-like stuff ancient builders used to waterproof boats and seal up ziggurats. Koenig turned the thing over in his hands and felt a jolt of recognition. Anyone who's taken a basic electronics class could see what he saw. Clay jar for a casing, copper as the cathode, iron as the anode, bitumen as the sealant. Pour in something acidic vinegar, maybe some old wine, and you get a simple battery. 2,000 years before Volta invented the battery, someone in ancient Mesopotamia had already built a device that could make electricity. When Koenig published his discovery in 1938, most archaeologists just brushed it off. They said it was probably a scroll holder or maybe a jar for sacred texts. The iron rod, probably just a coincidence or something that got stuck in there later. The whole resemblance to a modern battery, pure accident. People back then didn't know about electricity, so why would they ever build a battery? Pretty quickly, the so-called Baghdad Battery got labeled as a weird misinterpretation and filed away. But then more weird stuff started popping up. Things that just didn't fit with the usual story about how technology developed. Over in Egypt at Dendera, there are temple carvings showing these big bulb-like things attached to cables, with people handling them in ways that look a lot more like they're operating a machine than worshiping a god. If you squint, they look a lot like Crookes tubes, the kind used in early experiments with electricity, except those weren't invented until the 1870s. Egyptologists say the carvings show lotus flowers or sacred snakes, nothing to do with technology. At Giza, inside the Great Pyramid, there's this steady stream of stories from workers and early explorers, tales of getting shocks off the stones, metal objects picking up a charge or even getting magnetized after being left in the king's chamber. The pyramid itself, its precise granite blocks full of quartz, shafts lined up with the stars, its proportions matching strange mathematical constants, it all just feels like more than a tomb. Then in the 1960s, an American engineer named Christopher Dunn started looking closely at ancient Egyptian stonework, especially the massive granite boxes at the Serapeum of Saqqara. These things are carved from single pieces of granite weighing up to 70 tons, and they're cut with such precision that even today's craftsmen struggle to match it, even with diamond tools. The corners are dead sharp, the surfaces are almost perfectly flat, the walls keep the same thickness all the way through. That's not for show, that's engineering, but what were they building for? Dunn didn't just offer a new theory, he turned the whole story of the Great Pyramid on its head. What if it wasn't built as a tomb at all, but as a giant machine? Maybe those granite blocks, the strange chambers, the tight mathematical designs, and the way it lines up with electromagnetic fields, maybe all of that had a purpose we've just forgotten how to see. Dunn wondered if the pyramid was actually a power plant, using the Earth's own vibrations and the piezoelectric properties of quartz to generate energy. Most experts laughed off the idea, calling it fringe or pseudo-archaeology, something mainstream scholars wouldn't touch. But Dunn's questions lingered. How did the builders create such crazy precision, so exact that you need laser tools to measure it? Why did they choose certain stones with exact mineral mixes for certain rooms? Why all the mathematical obsession? And really, who goes to all that trouble just to bury someone? The real kicker is this. If the ancient Egyptians had high-level tech, where did it come from in the first place? When Egypt shows up in the archaeological record around 3100 BCE, it's already advanced, building in stone, using math and astronomy like old pros. But here's the weird part. Their earliest monuments are the most precise. Later dynasties couldn't match that skill. It's like the first generation knew something everyone else slowly forgot. You see the same thing with the Sumerians, who came before the Egyptians by a few centuries. Their earliest stuff shows the most sophistication. Their math doesn't start simple, it's already complex. Their astronomy tracks long-term cycles, the kind that take generations to watch. Their writing just appears fully formed. And when you read their clay tablet records, they claim their knowledge was given to them, taught by the Anunnaki, beings who came down from the heavens. For a long time, scholars just waved all this away, myths, stories about gods, legends to explain the world. But honestly, what if the Sumerians were more literal than we give them credit for? What if someone with advanced knowledge actually walked among them? What if the evidence is still out there, hiding under ancient ruins, just waiting for someone to finally look beyond old assumptions? One thing's clear. These ancient cultures knew things we still can't fully explain. The proof is right there in stone, metal, and clay. The real mystery is how they learned it, and what pieces of that lost knowledge are still buried, untouched, in places we've barely explored. Picture this. You're down in the basement of the National Museum of Iraq before the chaos hit in 2003. Before the looting, before history got scattered. It's cool and a little musty, the air thick with the smell of old earth and clay. Shelves run off into the shadows, crowded with artifacts wrapped in rags and paper, each with a faded tag linking it to some dig decades ago. Most of it has never been on display. Nobody's really studied it up close, let alone run modern tests. Everything just sits there in the dark, waiting. Somewhere in all that, you find the so-called Baghdad Battery, a clay jar tucked into a padded drawer, still holding its copper and iron parts. Back in 1938, when Koenig first guessed what it could do, he didn't have much to work with. But by the 1970s, researchers at the Smithsonian decided to try it out. They built a copy, sticking to the original materials and measurements, and filled it with grape juice, something the ancients would have had plenty of. It worked. The thing put out a little over 1 volt, not much, just enough to light a tiny bulb today, but it was real electricity from a design 2,000 years old. Koenig's hunch was right. The Baghdad Battery could be a battery. Was that actually its purpose? No one can say for sure, but now at least the idea wasn't ridiculous anymore. Some people think they used it for electroplating, using electric current to coat jewelry with gold. Mesopotamian goldsmiths made jewelry with such thin and perfect gold layers, it's hard to believe they did it by hand alone. If they had even a small source of electricity, electroplating makes sense. It explains the quality without needing modern machinery. Some people have floated the idea that these ancient devices had medical uses. Old records talk about shock treatments for different ailments, usually involving electric fish, like the torpedo ray. But if Mesopotamian doctors actually got their hands on a controllable source of electricity, you can imagine them using it to numb pain or maybe jumpstart healing. The Greek doctor Scribonius Largus, for example, wrote about using electric rays to treat headaches and gout back in the 1st century CE. If the Greeks knew this trick, odds are the Mesopotamians, whose medical knowledge was often ahead of the curve, got there first. Now here's the eerie part about the Baghdad Battery. It wasn't a one-off. Over the years, archaeologists started finding similar things at other Mesopotamian sites. Not piles of them, but enough to notice a pattern, jars with copper tubes, iron rods, bitumen seals. Always the same basic setup, always from around the same era, right before and during the Parthian period. And yet, the people who found them just saw oddities, not proof of some lost technology. The Parthians themselves left nothing in writing about electricity, no instructions, no descriptions, nothing to show they even knew what these things did. It's like they were copying a recipe without really knowing why, just repeating something handed down from people before them. The knowledge stuck around because people kept doing it, not because they really understood it. After a while, even the ones making these devices probably forgot what the point was. You see this sort of thing all over ancient tech. Skills and techniques appear fully formed, as if there's no learning curve. You find artifacts that don't match what their makers should have been capable of. It feels like people were handed blueprints from somewhere else, able to repeat but not really build on them, preserving scraps of something older. The cuneiform tablets don't even try to hide this. They say the Anunnaki, these beings from the sky, taught humans everything: farming, writing, math, metalwork, astronomy, all of it. These weren't far-off gods lost in myth, but teachers and engineers walking around showing people how things worked. The tablets list what they taught, and it's all practical stuff. How to dig a canal, predict an eclipse, smelt bronze, measure land, build with stone. The Sumerians called these gifts the ME, the building blocks of civilization. There are over 100 scattered through their texts: kingship, priesthood, law, metalwork, music, writing, war. Each one's a technology or a system, all needed for society to function. And they always say these were given, not discovered. Someone handed them down. For ages, we've assumed these stories are just ancient people giving the credit to gods because they couldn't imagine inventing things themselves. But what if we've got it all wrong? What if the Sumerians were just telling it straight? What if there really were visitors who taught them? And what if some of the tools and devices they used are still out there, under the dirt in Iraq, Syria, Iran, buried in ruins nobody's touched? Honestly, we've barely scratched the surface in Mesopotamia. Wars, politics, looting, just the sheer size of the place. Most of it's never been dug up. Satellite spot sites all over, mounds of ancient rubble everywhere, thousands of them most completely untouched. Underneath, sealed away, are thousands of years worth of debris waiting. So what if, buried in those layers, we find some of the Anunnaki's actual tech? Not just stories or symbols, but real artifacts, actual devices. Hard proof that someone, or something, with knowledge far beyond the locals left a mark there. That question hangs in the air, drifting across the desert night, through the ruins and the dust of fallen ziggurats. The ancient cities wait, silent and dark, patient as ever, for someone to finally dig deep enough and ask the right questions. But you can't separate technology from the real world. It needs stuff, energy, materials, a place to work, people who know what they're doing, and a reason to exist. If the Anunnaki or any other advanced group really did operate in ancient Mesopotamia, they'd need power sources, tools, and raw materials, just like anyone else. And honestly, when you look through the archaeological record, you start to see hints, strange ones, that life back then might not have been as simple as we think. Take 1936, for example. Austrian archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, the guy who found the Baghdad Battery, was digging at Qujat Rabu not far from Baghdad. Workers were clearing out a Parthian-era building, and suddenly they hit a sealed chamber. Somebody had packed it tight with clay and rubble, maybe to hide what was inside, or maybe to protect it for a future that never came. Inside the room, along with bits of pottery and rusty metal, Koenig found a bunch of objects like that first battery: jars with copper cylinders, iron rods, bitumen plugs. They weren't just scattered around. Whoever put them there had stored them neatly, like this was a workshop or some kind of storeroom full of devices we're only guessing about. These jars weren't just for show. The copper cylinders were stained on the inside, like something acidic had been poured in and out a bunch of times. The corrosion patterns backed that up. This wasn't a one-and-done ritual object tossed in a tomb. These were tools, used, maintained, and saved for the next job. Someone in ancient Mesopotamia was actually generating electricity, enough that they needed a bunch of these things and a place to work with them. Of course, making a spark is just the start. The real question is what you do with it. A few little batteries like these can power small stuff, electroplating, maybe some basic medical gadgets, possibly even lighting if you set it up right. But if you want to run real machines, you need way more power, and that means infrastructure, stuff we haven't dug up yet. Or maybe we have, but we've been looking right at it without realizing what it is. Think about the ziggurat, those giant stepped pyramids in Sumerian cities. Everyone says they were temples, holy mountains where priests did their thing for the gods. Sure, rituals happened up there. But when you start to look at how they're built, the way they're put together, the materials, the way they sit in the landscape, it starts to feel like there's more going on. Ziggurats have mud brick at the core, fired and glazed bricks on the outside, sometimes decorated with stars and planets. But here's the weird bit. In between the bricks, builders laid down mats woven from reeds and soaked in bitumen. These mats aren't random. They show up again and again, making layers that break up the stacks of brick. Archaeologists usually say they're just to keep moisture out, stop water from wrecking the place. But in the 1970s, a French engineer named Pierre Marot looked at this and said, wait a second, what if those bitumen-soaked mats are actually electrical insulators? Bitumen doesn't conduct electricity, it blocks it. Those layers would keep electrical current from leaking away into the ground. And if the bricks themselves, the local clay, had the right mix of minerals, they could actually create piezoelectric effects when squeezed or shaken. That would mean the whole ziggurat could work like a giant capacitor, storing up electrical charge from the earth. Here's the thing, Mesopotamia sits right on top of active fault lines. The ground shakes with little earthquakes all the time, too small for most people to notice, but instruments pick them up. When these tremors hit certain crystals and minerals, quartz, some clays, they squeeze out a bit of electric charge. That's the piezoelectric effect. If you build a massive structure out of those materials, add insulating layers so the charge doesn't leak out, and plop it down where the earth is always rumbling, you've basically built a machine that turns natural vibrations into electricity. The idea sounds wild, almost like science fiction, until you really dig into the details. The Sumerians didn't just build anywhere, they picked their sites carefully. Always close to water, sure, but also in places that, according to modern geology, sit right on top of seismic hot spots. And those ziggurats, their corners line up with true north, south, east, and west, so precisely that it's almost eerie. It's not about religion, it's about locking into the Earth's magnetic field. Inside, you find chambers filled with copper and bronze fixtures, perfect for conducting electricity. Up on the summit temples, there's more metal, bronze statues, copper doors, gold decorations. Basically, terminals just waiting for a current to run through. Back in 1985, a group at MIT took bricks from the ziggurat of Ur and put them under the microscope. They found loads of quartz and magnetite, both materials that do interesting things with electricity. The researchers stressed the bricks in the lab to mimic earthquake vibrations. Every time, the bricks gave off a small but steady electrical charge. The team published their results, pointing out how unusual the bricks were, but they didn't go so far as to suggest the Sumerians did it on purpose. That would have been too much, too weird, too far from what most archaeologists are willing to consider. Still, the facts just won't go away. These buildings were made from materials that produce electricity when shaken. They had layers to keep that energy from leaking out. They were built where the Earth moves the most. They're aligned with magnetic north. They're packed with conductive metals in all the right places. Either this is the luckiest accident in human history, or the builders knew exactly what they were doing, and we've just forgotten. So if ziggurats really could make and store electricity, what did they use it for? That's where things get fuzzy. The evidence gets patchy, but if you're open-minded, there are hints everywhere. In Babylon, archaeologists found tunnels under the city. The walls are made from glazed brick and lined with bitumen. Inside, there are old copper tubes and bronze fittings. The official story says they're drains or ceremonial tunnels, but the design doesn't fit. The tubes are too narrow for water, the bitumen seal is overkill, and the metal just isn't needed for plumbing. Now, if you wanted to move electricity around using the materials and tech they had back then, you'd do it just like this. You use copper or bronze as wires, bitumen as insulation, and bury the whole system to keep it safe and cool. That's exactly what these tunnels look like, practical, not ceremonial. Jump to Nineveh, the old Assyrian capital. In the 1800s, archaeologists found rooms lined with smooth alabaster slabs. Here's the kicker: no soot marks anywhere, even though people lived there for ages. Alabaster is a kind of gypsum, and under the right conditions, it can store an electrical charge. If those rooms were capacitor banks, storage spots for energy, using alabaster would make perfect sense. And the lack of soot, it means they weren't lighting these rooms with oil lamps or torches. They must have used something else, something clean, something that left no trace. Then there's Egypt and the famous Dendera reliefs. People argue about them because they look a lot like Crookes tubes, early electric lights. These carvings are deep underground, in a pitch-black crypt beneath the Temple of Hathor. But the carvings themselves are flawless. No torch marks, no soot, nothing to show anyone ever burned oil or fire down there for light. Egyptian archaeologists see the problem but can't explain it. If those objects on the walls were actually some kind of ancient electric lights, suddenly, the whole thing makes sense. Back in the 1990s, John Cadman, he was an electrical engineer, looked at those Dendera carvings through the eyes of someone who'd actually built circuits and run wires. He noticed the big, bulb-shaped things in the reliefs, the ones that look a lot like old vacuum tubes, always have these braided cables hooked up to them. The cables run off to boxes that look suspiciously like batteries, and the people in the carvings, they're holding these bulbs with both hands, almost like they're handling something portable, maybe even dangerous, charged up or hot. Inside the bulbs you see serpents, and for the Egyptians, serpents weren't just snakes. They meant energy, movement, power, basically, the ancient version of a lightning bolt. Cadman didn't just study the pictures. He tried to rebuild what he saw. He made a glass tube, pumped the air out, set up a simple filament inside, and hooked the thing up to a battery. When he switched it on, the tube glowed. No fire, no smoke, none of the heat you'd get from burning anything. Just light, plain, and simple. It actually worked. And when you line up his device with the scenes on the temple wall, it gets hard to shake the feeling that the Egyptians were showing off something a lot more advanced than we give them credit for. Maybe they really did know tricks we've forgotten. But here, where it gets even weirder, these little flashes of lost technology, they keep showing up in different places, totally different cultures, but with this same thread running through the stories. Each culture points back to these mysterious ancient teachers, the Anunnaki to the Sumerians, the Neteru to the Egyptians, feathered serpents in Mesoamerica, devas in India. All over the map, separated by oceans and centuries, but all talking about the same thing. Someone from somewhere else showing humans how to build, how to use tools, how to make civilization work. What if they're not just spinning myths? What if those stories are pretty much straight-up memories of real encounters with people, or beings, who had electrical know-how, who understood materials, who could make and store energy in ways that would blow our minds even now? And maybe the reason we haven't found the smoking gun isn't because it's not there, but because we've been looking with the wrong assumptions about what's possible for ancient folks. The so-called Baghdad Battery gives off 1.1 volts. That's not a guess. People have tested it over and over. Ziggurats, the big stepped temples, are built from piezoelectric stone and have insulating layers. That's just geology. In old tunnels, you've got copper pipes sealed up with bitumen. Archaeologists found those and wrote about them. And those Dendera reliefs, they show what straight up look like vacuum tubes hooked to power sources. You can see it for yourself in the photos. None of this by itself proves the Anunnaki had high-tech gadgets. But when you put all these things together, it's hard not to see a pattern. Someone in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt understood electrical stuff we didn't figure out again until a couple hundred years ago. If that knowledge was real, if it actually existed, then maybe there's still evidence out there, hidden in ruins nobody dug up yet, locked away in collapsed ziggurats, buried in workshops in ancient cities that are still just dots on a map. It could be sitting in the dark, just waiting for someone to find it and turn our whole story upside down. Night falls and the world goes quiet, and in that hush, you can almost hear the wind blowing over the ruins in Iraq, a whisper that's waited 5,000 years for somebody bold enough to really listen. But let's not stop at electricity. Even if ancient people had batteries and simple bulbs, that's just the beginning. The old Sumerian tablets say the Anunnaki were experts at more than just energy. They knew about engineering, astronomy, materials, and maybe most surprising of all, genetics. And that's where the evidence starts to get really strange. Take 1850, for example. Austin Henry Layard, a British archaeologist, was digging up Nimrud, once a great Assyrian city south of Mosul. His team uncovered a sprawling palace filled with thousands of carved stone panels. Most of them showed the usual stuff: kings hunting lions, armies marching, priests doing rituals, lines of tribute. Classic Assyrian wall art. But in the middle of all that, Layard found carvings that just didn't fit the mold. One ancient relief catches your eye: human bodies with eagle heads, all dressed in these fancy robes. They stand tall, holding strange buckets and pinecone-shaped tools, and they're busy with a stylized tree, touching it just so, like they're following some set procedure, not bowing in worship. The Assyrians called these figures the Apkallu, borrowing the word from the Sumerians. It means say or wise one. In Mesopotamian tradition, the Apkallu were 7 legendary sages from before the Great Flood, sent by the god Enki to teach people the secrets of civilization. But these images are weird. The Apkallu are hybrids, part human, part animal. Maybe that's just meant to show off their godly powers, or maybe it hints at something stranger, beings who really look different from regular humans. The carvings always show them working as teachers or advisors. They stand next to kings, join in ceremonies, and guard what the texts call the sacred knowledge. And always they're clutching that mysterious bucket and cone. Nobody really knows what those things were for. The usual explanation is they're just ceremonial props. Maybe the bucket held holy water, and the cone was a kind of sprinkler for blessings. But in the 2010s, engineer and researcher Brian Forrester took a closer look and offered a different idea. What if the buckets actually held substances, chemicals or biological materials, and the cones were tools for applying them? Maybe these scenes show the Apkallu modifying plants or tinkering with the sacred tree. Not magic, but some kind of ancient bioengineering. Sounds wild, but then you look at Sumerian farming texts. These clay tablets, some from as far back as 2500 BCE, explain farming techniques that go way beyond what you'd expect for the time. They talk about selective breeding, hybridizing, grafting, methods so advanced they let people create entirely new plant varieties. The Sumerians weren't just planting wheat. They cultivated dozens of grain types, each matched to different soils and water supplies. Their date palm cultivation used principles that wouldn't be explained scientifically until Mendel's genetics experiments in the 1800s. They knew how to cross certain plants and predict the results. Where did that knowledge come from? The tablets credit the Apkallu. These sages, the stories say, showed people how to choose seeds, how to breed for useful traits, how to turn wild plants into crops. Modern botanists who trace the history of wheat see something odd. Domestication seems sudden, with wild grasses becoming crops in a flash, skipping the slow crawl of natural selection. It looks like someone stepped in, guiding the process, speeding it up, making plants that suit human needs in a fraction of the normal time. It's the same story with animals. The Sumerians raised sheep, goats, cattle, pigs, all bred to be bigger, tamer, more productive than their wild cousins. Genetic studies point back to the Fertile Crescent around 8000 BCE, but the quick jump from wild to domestic baffles scientists. Take sheep. Wild ones don't grow thick, soft wool. That trait needs generations of careful breeding. Yet in the archaeological record, it pops up fast, as if someone with a plan was running the show. Then there's the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories we have. There's this wild man, Enkidu, described as being transformed after meeting civilization. The goddess Araru creates him from clay and essence. At first, he lives among animals, running free, drinking from streams. But after he meets a temple woman, everything changes. He loses his animal ways, gains speech, becomes fully human. People usually read this as a metaphor for taming wildness, but what if it's more direct? What if Enkidu stands in for an earlier human type, someone genetically different, less advanced? Maybe that transformation was a real intervention, a leap that gave him modern human consciousness. Sumerian creation myths don't exactly beat around the bush. They say the Anunnaki made humans by mixing clay, biological material, with the essence of a god, which sure sounds like genetic information. The stories even mention early failures. Beings that didn't work out had to be destroyed or recycled before finally getting it right. Honestly, it's like reading about genetic engineering, only told with the words ancient people had. They talk about trial and error, making prototypes, tweaking things, basically a hands-on process to create beings for a purpose. Fast forward to modern genetics. We know Homo sapiens, our species, showed up in Africa around 300,000 years ago. Physically, we looked like us. But the humans who painted caves, built tools, and spoke in full languages, that burst of creativity, didn't really show up until about 50,000 to 70,000 years ago. Scientists call this the Great Leap Forward, but no one agrees what set it off. Was it just culture building up slowly? A lucky genetic mutation, mixing with Neanderthals or Denisovans, which actually happened? Or maybe something way stranger, some group stepped in and upgraded us, gave us the edge that made us different from every other animal. If you ask the ancient Sumerians, they'd say, yep, that's exactly it. The Anunnaki found early humans, tweaked them, and created a new kind of worker, someone who could keep up a civilization, someone who could run things. Jump to 1953. Watson and Crick cracked the structure of DNA, the double helix that holds the instructions for all life. As scientists dug deeper, they found stretches of human DNA that didn't seem to do anything. For years, they called it junk DNA because no one knew what it was for. Turns out it's not junk at all. Much of it controls how and when genes turn on or off. Basically, it's the software telling our cells what to do. It gets weirder. About 8% of human DNA comes from ancient viruses, retroviruses that slip their genes into our ancestors' DNA and never left. This is called horizontal gene transfer. It's a way for genes to jump between species without sex or reproduction, and it can speed up evolution by adding new traits out of nowhere. So imagine an advanced civilization wanted to upgrade a species. They could use viruses to slip new genes into the population, let those genes spread, and pretty soon the whole species has the update. From the inside, it would feel like a sudden leap, a mystery. But to the engineers, it's just careful planning. Is there any proof that happened to us? Well, humans are strangely alike genetically. We're more similar to each other than different groups of chimpanzees are, even though chimps live in a much smaller area. That points to a bottleneck. At some point, our numbers crashed, and everyone alive today comes from a small group of survivors. Most scientists say this happened about 70,000 years ago, maybe after the Toba volcano blew up. But what if it wasn't a disaster that picked who survived, but someone choosing who got to move forward? Select a handful of humans, give them upgrades, and let them take over. To a geneticist, it would still look like a bottleneck, a small group giving rise to everyone. But the real reason would be intervention, not catastrophe. The Sumerian stories actually spell this out. The Anunnaki pick humans, modify them, try a few times before getting it right, and finally create a worker species to run things. The The tablets even talk about failed attempts and adjustments, classic trial and error, but with biology instead of machines. Then, in 2010, Svante Pääbo and his team sequenced the Neanderthal genome and compared it to ours. Non-Africans carry about 1–4% Neanderthal DNA, clear proof we mixed. But there was another surprise. Some Neanderthal genes didn't just slip in, they spread because they were useful. These genes help with our immune systems, skin and hair, and, most interestingly, brain development. Look at the pattern. Modern humans didn't just get Neanderthal genes by accident or through the odd fling here and there. We grabbed the good stuff, held on to traits that helped us, and let the rest slip away. That's hybridization, not just random mixing, but a kind of intentional blending. The Sumerians talked about this in their farming records. The Apkallu supposedly taught it. Take two close but different species, cross them, keep the best from both, and you end up with something that's better than either one alone. So, did the Anunnaki pull this off with early humans? Did they mix Homo sapiens with Neanderthals or Denisovans, creating hybrids with new abilities? Did they use genetic methods that we're only now starting to understand? Techniques that looked like magic to ancient people, but were really just advanced science? It's easy to get lost in the questions, but the core idea sticks. Sumerian texts describe beings who seemed to get genetics, who could shape living things, who made humans on purpose by mixing essences and tweaking the results. Archaeology shows sudden leaps, plants and animals domesticated almost overnight, as if someone was steering the process. Genetics backs this up, population bottlenecks, sudden jumps in behavior, and the way our DNA holds carefully selected genes from other hominins. It doesn't look random. None of this proves the Anunnaki were real or that they had sci-fi technology. But it does point to something weird in our past, something that doesn't fit the usual story of slow, steady evolution. If that something was high-tech intervention, if advanced beings really tinkered with us, then maybe, somewhere under the ruins of Mesopotamia, evidence still waits. Not just old batteries or mysterious buildings, but the remains of labs, tools, the kind of bioengineering gear you'd need to actually change a species. Jump to 2003. The US invades Iraq, chaos erupts, and looters hit Baghdad's National Museum. Thousands of artifacts vanish, cuneiform tablets, cylinder seals, tiny objects that might not look like much but could hold secrets. Some were never photographed or cataloged. No one even knows what's gone. Some melted down, some sold off, some just destroyed. But here's the twist. After the looting, odd artifacts started popping up on the black market. Weird objects, things that didn't match any known type, stuff that looked too modern or just flat-out mysterious. Dealers whispered about them, unsure what they'd found, pricing them on a hunch, and then gone. Snapped up by private collectors, disappearing before anyone could really study them. What was lost back then? What got stolen or destroyed? Was there proof of Anunnaki tech among those artifacts, written off as junk or curiosity? Researchers wonder if the best evidence is already gone, trashed by people who had no clue what they were holding. And still, under Iraq's deserts, in unexcavated sites and forgotten ruins, more evidence probably waits. But time running out. Erosion, rising water, bulldozers, new construction, all of it eats away at what's left. Mud brick buildings crumble, secrets turn to dust, and every year the chances to answer these ancient questions just slip further away. Did the Anunnaki really have advanced technology? Are their tools still buried out there? The evidence hints at the possibility. But that's all it is, a possibility. Proof takes digging, real research, and the guts to admit that ancient people might have known things we're only now catching up to. For now, the desert keeps its silence. The questions linger in the night, unanswered, maybe unanswerable. But maybe the most striking evidence isn't hidden at all. It's right out in the open. Massive structures, precision-built monuments that even today's engineers can't quite explain. These aren't lost. They're still standing, challenging everything we think we know about the ancient world. The Great Pyramid of Giza rises out of the desert on the Nile's west bank, all limestone and sunlight, towering 481 feet above the sand. For almost 4,000 years, nothing humans built came close in height. Nobody topped it until England's Lincoln Cathedral in the 1300s. Most Egyptologists say Khufu was behind it, built around 2560 BCE. They picture teams of workers, sweating through decades of backbreaking labor with copper tools and wooden sledges, all guided by simple math. But if you really look at how this thing is put together, the usual story starts to wobble. We're talking about 2.3 million limestone blocks, some as light as 2.5 tons, others tipping the scale at 15. And then there's the granite in the king's chamber, massive slabs weighing up to 80 tons each. The seams between blocks are so tight you can't even slip a knife blade through. Its base covers 13 acres, and the whole thing is leveled so perfectly that it's off by less than an inch. As for the alignment, the sides line up with the cardinal points to within a hair, just a few arc minutes off. That kind of precision means somebody had to be really good at astronomy and surveying. David Zink, an American architect who got obsessed with the pyramid's numbers, ran the math. To finish on schedule in 20 years, workers had to quarry, move, cut, and place about 300 blocks every single day, one block every 2 minutes during a long shift. Even if you handed modern construction crews cranes and power tools, that pace would push them hard. Hand them copper chisels and wooden hammers, and it just sounds impossible. Yet there it is, which means either we're wrong about how long it took, or the people who built it had tricks up their sleeves we don't know about. Maybe both. Christopher Dunn, an engineer who spent years crawling around Egyptian ruins, started measuring the insides of the Great Pyramid in the 1970s. He zeroed in on the king's chamber, a stark granite box buried deep in the stone. The slabs inside came from Aswan, 500 miles to the south, each one weighing at least 50 tons, some as much as 80. They had to carry them up the Nile, haul them inland, and then lift them over 150 feet into the pyramid, slotting them together so tightly there's barely room for a human hair. And all this, while millions of tons of rock press down from above. That granite isn't just hard, it's packed with quartz, which can generate electrical charge when squeezed or vibrated. The room's shape forms a resonant cavity, amplifying certain sound frequencies. Dunn argued that the king's chamber was never meant for a dead pharaoh. It's a resonator, maybe even a machine. He thought the builders harnessed vibration, turned it into electricity through the granite's piezoelectric effect, and used that energy for something we still don't get. He also looked at the so-called air shafts, thin tunnels running from the king's and queen's chambers toward the pyramid's surface. They don't actually reach the outside. They just dead end inside the rock. If they were supposed to be for ventilation, they're not doing the job. Dunn guessed they had another purpose, maybe as waveguides, channels for energy or signals, or even as pipes for chemicals or gases moving through the pyramid while it was working. In 2002, a tiny robot with a camera crawled through the Queen's chamber's southern shaft, squeezing into places no human could go. It found a limestone door fitted with copper handles. When researchers drilled through it, they didn't find a room, just another tiny space and then another door. No one knows what's beyond that. The Egyptian government stopped the work, saying the pyramid needed to be protected. So why all these hidden spaces and sealed doors in a so-called tomb? Tombs need a chamber for the body and a passage or two, maybe a few corridors for rituals. They don't need multiple secret chambers, copper fittings, or all this strange internal architecture. But machines do. Complex systems do. Technologies designed to channel energy or signals or do something we haven't figured out yet. They need all that. And maybe that's exactly what we're looking at. Dunn's power plant theory really shakes things up, especially when he talks about the Grand Gallery. Picture that massive 153-foot-long hallway climbing up to the king's chamber, its walls lined with odd slots and corbelled niches that have stumped Egyptologists for ages. Dunn thinks these slots once held resonators, maybe crystals, maybe metal. that could vibrate in sync with certain frequencies inside the pyramid. The idea is, they'd amplify those vibrations and send energy straight to the king's chamber. If you buy into the pyramid as harmonic oscillator concept, then suddenly every stone, chamber, and hallway matters. All that limestone, it's not just for show, it anchors the building and stores electric charge. The granite, that stuff's piezoelectric, it can turn pressure into electricity. Internal tunnels focus and direct energy. Even how the pyramid lines up with the stars isn't random, it's tuned to the Earth's electromagnetic field. The builders wove in math everywhere. Pi, phi, the speed of light, even Earth's measurements. It starts to look like these people weren't just stacking rocks, they knew their physics maybe better than we do. But here's the big question. Could anyone in 2560 BCE really pull this off? Did Khufu's architects understand resonance and electromagnetic fields? Or were they just copying blueprints from way before their time? Maybe even leftovers from the Anunnaki, just building what they were told without really getting the tech behind it. There's this old artifact called the inventory stela, found near the Sphinx. It's from the 26th dynasty, about 670 BCE, so more than 2,000 years after Khufu. The inscription talks about Khufu fixing up the Sphinx and building a pyramid near a temple to Isis that was already standing in his day. If that's true, Khufu wasn't the original builder. He just restored or finished something ancient, a monument that had already been around for who knows how long. So old, it predates written Egyptian history. Then there's the Sphinx itself. Geologist Robert Schoch studied its weathering in the 1990s and found deep channels carved by water, not wind. But Giza, been bone-dry desert for over 5,000 years. The last time there was enough rain for this kind of erosion, back during the African humid period, maybe as far back as 5,000 to 7,000 BCE. If Schoch's right, the Sphinx is way older than we thought, maybe carved before the end of the last ice age, when the climate was much wetter. And if the Sphinx is that old, who's to say the Great Pyramid isn't just as ancient? Maybe both were built by a civilization that came before the Egyptians entirely. Even the ancient Egyptians seem to hint at this. Their stories talk about the first time, Zep Tepi, a golden age when gods walked the earth, teaching humans and building incredible things. According to them, the pyramids and temples were just repairs, attempts to bring back the perfection of that lost era. Imagine if the Great Pyramid isn't 4,500 years old, but more like 10,000. If some advanced culture built it, with better tools and knowledge, suddenly, the insane precision doesn't seem so impossible. The Egyptians, inheriting these mysterious monuments, naturally credited them to gods or superhuman beings, because who else could have pulled it off? And Egypt isn't alone. Look at Baalbek in Lebanon. The Temple of Jupiter sits on a gigantic stone platform, using blocks so huge, 800 tons each for the trilithon, and another stone in the quarry tipping the scales at over 1,000 tons, that even the Romans who built the temple itself couldn't have moved them. Those foundation stones were already ancient when Rome arrived, and nobody's figured out how they got there. Still, those blocks got moved. Not just shifted, but lifted and set down with jaw-dropping accuracy, so precise that the builders didn't even need mortar to hold them together. Today's biggest cranes can handle around 20,000 tons, but only if you give them stable ground, electricity, and a whole lot of support. So how did ancient builders haul 800-ton stones with none of that? Unless they had some trick up their sleeve that we've totally missed, something outside the usual ropes and pulleys. Maybe sound, or magnetism, or some lost technique that just slipped through history's cracks. Think about Edward Leedskalnin, the guy behind Florida's Coral Castle in the 1920s. He moved and stacked limestone blocks, some as heavy as 30 tons, all by himself. He worked at night, kept his methods secret, and only hinted at things like magnetic currents and earth energies. Whatever he did, he pulled it off alone, without cranes or a crew. His success throws a curveball at our assumptions. Maybe there really are ways to move massive stones that don't need brute force or modern machines, just knowledge we've let slip away. Did the Anunnaki know these secrets? Did they pass them down? The old Sumerian tablets sure paint them as master engineers, landscape shapers, city builders, monument makers. And the proof? Their handiwork is still standing. Ancient megaliths quietly insist that someone, long ago, knew how to pull off things we can barely match today, even with computers and power tools. As night settles over Giza and the wind picks up a bit, the same question hangs in the air. Who actually built these things, and how did they know what they knew? But maybe the clearest signs of advanced ancient tech aren't giant stones or strange artifacts. They're the texts. The Sumerians and their neighbors left behind descriptions of machines, vehicles, and abilities that sound impossible for their time. But the way they wrote about them is so detailed, it's getting harder to brush them off as pure myth. Take the Epic of Etana. It's one of the oldest stories we have, from around 2600 BCE. Etana needs to reach the heavens to find a magical plant, so an eagle offers to carry him up. The story doesn't just say he flew, it describes the trip step by step. As they rise, Etana looks down. The land turns into a hill, then the sea starts to look like a stream. Higher up, the land shrinks to a garden plot and the sea looks like a bowl. Go higher, and now everything below is just a round dish. It's exactly what you'd see if you kept going up, features flattening out, the world turning into simple shapes as you rise above it. The writer isn't reaching for flowery metaphors. It reads like someone actually saw the world from high above, centuries before humans supposedly ever left the ground. Etana gets scared as the earth falls away beneath him. He decides he's gone far enough, comes back down, and still gets his wish in the end. The flight isn't painted as some miracle, just a tough, risky journey, made possible by the eagle, whatever that really was. And Etana's story isn't alone. Mesopotamian texts are packed with flight. Enlil has a storm bird that thunders and covers huge distances. Inanna rides a dazzling boat of heaven, fast as the wind back and forth between sky and earth. Enki's got his own underwater craft to reach the hidden depths where he keeps his palace. Submarines, flying ships, machines, these stories keep cropping up. You can't help but wonder, did they know something we've forgotten? These vehicles aren't described like they're magic tricks. They're physical machines, plain and simple. They make noise. Lights flash. Skilled pilots have to run them. Sometimes they break down and need fixing. Before you even get in, there's a checklist to follow. Their technology may be way ahead of their time, but still understandable, still governed by rules. Even when the rules aren't spelled out, you get the feeling someone could figure them out. Take the Mahabharata. This ancient Indian epic goes all in with its flying machine descriptions. They call them Vimanas, and there's no hand-waving about how they work. The texts dig into details, how they're built, how you fly them, what they can do. There's even the Vaimanika Shastra, a Sanskrit text that, while pulled together later, draws on ancient material. It's got technical specs for different Vimanas, measurements, materials, power sources, flight abilities, the works. One model, the Shakuna Vimana, gets called bird-shaped. It can take off straight up. Supposedly, it runs on a Mercury engine. The text says Mercury spins in sealed chambers to make it go. Sounds wild, right? But then you hear about the 1960s. NASA actually messed around with Mercury ion engines, using ionized mercury and electromagnetic fields for thrust. They dropped the idea because mercury is nasty stuff, but the science held up. So did ancient Indian engineers really have this kind of propulsion? Or were they just describing something they'd seen, trying to capture how it looked and worked, even if they didn't fully understand the guts of it? The Vaimanika Shastra reads like a tech manual. It warns you what happens if you mess up, tells you how to keep things running, lays out maintenance steps. This isn't a fairy tale, it's technical writing. You see the same no-nonsense tone in old Sumerian texts when they talk about the Me, these core building blocks of civilization that the Anunnaki supposedly handed down. These aren't just big ideas like justice or kingship. They include real-world skills, metalwork, leatherwork, construction, navigation, and interestingly, the art of ascent and the art of descent. Sounds a lot like flying up and coming down. Vertical travel, not just metaphor. Look at the descent of Inanna. The goddess doesn't just drift into some mythical underworld. She goes through what reads more like a vast underground facility. She passes through 7 gates, and at each one she strips off a piece of her regalia until she's standing naked in front of the underworld's judges. The gates, they're described with mechanical details. Doors that open and shut, barriers to pass, checkpoints. The underworld isn't some burning chaos. It's a complex with halls, rooms, and thrones, an organized place beneath the earth. Gene Decode, an American researcher, dug into these texts and modern finds and suggests that the Sumerian underworld could actually mean real subterranean complexes, networks of tunnels and chambers the Anunnaki built, where they worked out of sight. If you've got advanced tech and don't want the general public poking around, you build underground. It's safer, more private. Fast forward to 2013. Researchers used ground-penetrating radar under the Giza Plateau and found massive voids and tunnels way below the known pyramid chambers. These networks run sideways for who knows how far and drop deeper than anyone's drilled so far. The Egyptian authorities keep people out, saying it's for safety and preservation, but similar hidden structures have turned up under Angkor Wat, Teotihuacan, and even some Mesopotamian sites. So what's down there? Maybe storage for sensitive gear or tech. Maybe workshops, places to build or fix things without an audience. Maybe command centers running the show for whole civilizations. The Sumerian texts say it's all of that and more. Under the surface, that's where the real power lived. The Anunnaki's base, their equipment rooms, their workspaces. That's where they kept the world turning. One old tablet, people call it the King of Kish fragment, tells a strange story. A king gets pulled into the depths by the god Enki, who shows him the secrets of the waters and the fire that flows through metal. The king learns these secrets and comes back up with clear instructions. Build what you've seen. It reads less like myth and more like a crash course in technology. Imagine someone touring a high-tech lab, getting a hands-on lesson, and returning home to put it all into practice. That's straight-up knowledge transfer, the kind you get by seeing and doing, not just hearing about it. Jump to the 1960s. The US military had these remote viewers, folks trained to see distant places with their minds, part of Project Stargate. They got asked to look at ancient Sumerian sites, especially around Eridu. Odd thing, several viewers working separately described massive underground structures beneath the ruins. They talked about chambers stuffed with objects they couldn't name, arrays of crystal, odd metallic shapes, devices that looked like they made or stored energy. The reports got classified and the project disappeared, but what they described sounded a lot like what the Sumerian texts say: hidden facilities underground, packed with Anunnaki tech. So what's the deal? Are those places still down there? Has someone already found them and kept quiet? Or are they still untouched, buried deep under mud and stone, waiting for someone with the right tools to dig them up without wrecking everything? The Sumerian tablets spell out a moment that answers all of this: the Anunnaki leaving. After the flood, after humans bounced back and rebuilt, the Anunnaki didn't die or fade into legend, they just left. Packed up, took most of their gear and went. But not all of it. According to the texts, they left some things behind. Sealed and hidden, sure, but not destroyed. Waiting for the day people got smart enough to handle them. There's a bit in the Epic of Gilgamesh that gets right to the point. Gilgamesh, chasing immortality, finds Utnapishtim, the immortal survivor of the flood. But Utnapishtim doesn't hand over some magic herb. Instead, he tells Gilgamesh the secret lies beneath the foundation stone of Eridu, treasures left by the gods. He warns these things are dangerous, that you need wisdom to even go near them, and messing with tech you don't understand only brings disaster. Gilgamesh never gets his hands on these treasures. He fails, gives up on immortality, and heads home. But that passage leaves a mark. The tradition says real, physical objects, Anunnaki leftovers, were hidden in certain places. Maybe not easy to get, probably protected, but not just stories. All through the 20th century, archaeologists tried to dig in Iraq, but war, politics, and sanctions kept getting in the way. So many sites stayed only half explored. People spotted promising mounds from the air, marked them on maps, and then had to walk away. Meanwhile, rumors kept swirling, locals and diggers talking about weird finds. Metal artifacts that didn't rust, crystals that looked man-made, deep chambers with stuff no one could explain. Where did these things go? If they were real, most vanished, snapped up by collectors or smashed by people who didn't know what they were holding. Still, the stories won't die. Researchers whisper about them at conferences, jot them in field notes nobody else sees. And the big question sticks around. What's still buried under the dirt in Mesopotamia? The old texts say the Anunnaki built their main base at Eridu, the first city, where kingship itself supposedly came down from the sky. Eridu sits in southern Iraq, right where the Tigris and Euphrates meet, in marshes that have been drained and flooded over and over. Archaeologists have dug there plenty, especially in the 1940s and 1970s, and found 18 stacked temple levels, one on top of the last, reaching back to 5400 BCE. But here's the thing, they never hit bedrock. The digging stopped at the oldest temple layer, but scans say there's more, even deeper. Foundations that could be older than anything we've seen so far. In the 1980s, Iraqi archaeologists wanted to dig further, but war broke out. Then came more war, sanctions, another invasion. Now the site just sits there in a region that's still unstable, still risky, and mostly out of reach for researchers. So whatever lies beneath, it's still waiting. What's really under the deepest layers of Eridu? What's holding up those ancient temples? The Sumerians would have told you it was the House of Enki, an underwater palace, a kind of control center where the Anunnaki ran things on Earth. Now, if that's more than just a story, if Enki's home was a real place, then under Eridu's ruins, beneath all those centuries of mud and sand, there could be structures waiting that would upend everything we know about history. Imagine finding proof that beings with advanced technology actually walked around in ancient Mesopotamia, using devices we've been trying to figure out for ages. It's late. You're drifting off that edge of sleep, blurring reality, and the mind wanders. What if something's really buried out there in the desert? Machines that still work after 10,000 years, sealed away from air and water, untouched and waiting in total darkness. Maybe they're just waiting for us to catch up, to dig them out and finally understand that we weren't ever alone here. Maybe we've always been students, heirs to knowledge we've only just started to remember. The desert wind carries these thoughts across the empty nights, through the ruins of old cities whose names barely hang on in memory, into the space between what we believe and what's actually true. And underneath all that buried but not destroyed, hidden but not lost, something waits. Patient as stone, quiet as the passing ages. But before sleep really takes over, there's one more thing to consider. Not artifacts or ancient scripts this time, but the astronomical knowledge written into monuments and tablets, evidence of a kind of understanding that just seems way too advanced for people supposedly using only their eyes and some basic math. Take the ziggurat of Ur. Saddam Hussein had it partly rebuilt in the 1980s, following the original foundation. Its corners line up with the cardinal points, north, south, east, west, with a level of precision you can measure in arc minutes, just tiny slices of a single degree. To pull that off, you need to know where true north is. Not the magnetic north you get from a compass, which wanders around over the centuries, but the real north, the axis the Earth spins on, the point the stars circle around. To find that kind of true north, you have to watch the sky for years. You track how the stars spin, find the center point of that rotation, and then use some pretty sharp geometry to anchor that point onto the ground. The Sumerians didn't have compasses, those only showed up in China much later. They used the stars, which means they knew the sky well, really, really well. Look at the Mull, Apin tablets. They're from around 1000 BCE, but the stuff inside them goes back much further. They're like an ancient astronomical handbook: constellations, the paths of the sun and moon, the movements of the planets, and even rules for calculating calendars. The tablets track Venus so closely it takes decades of steady observation. They mark when certain stars first pop up in the dawn or disappear at dusk, details that take real patience. Sure, some of this was practical. They needed calendars for planting and for festivals, but the accuracy is just over the top. The mall. Pinned tablets get the length of the year down to within a few minutes, 365, 24 days. They nail the moon cycle, new moon to new moon, at 29.53 days, right in line with what we know today. They list the 5 visible planets and chart their movements, even the times when planets seem to move backward in the sky. With math that takes more than just looking up, you have to calculate, predict, and check your work over generations. So how did they do it? No telescopes, no clocks, none of the tools modern astronomers use. Gerald Hawkins, the guy who made a name for himself studying Stonehenge, looked into Mesopotamian astronomy in the 1970s. He figured their accuracy had to mean one of two things. Either they ran organized observation programs for centuries, requiring a level of stability and record-keeping that we don't see proof for, or they inherited this knowledge from even earlier astronomers, people whose names and stories have vanished but whose data lived on. The Sumerians themselves insisted on this story. They said the Anunnaki, especially Anu, the sky god whose name literally means heaven, gave them their astronomical knowledge. Anu's priests didn't just study the stars, they ran observatories and tracked the movements in the sky. But if you read the tablets, they weren't actually discovering new patterns. They were double-checking old ones, confirming that the ancient records, the ones from before the flood, still got it right about what would show up in the heavens. Jump to the 1990s. Researchers at Griffith Observatory and Lowe's Angels decided to see what the sky looked like over Mesopotamia thousands of years ago. They fired up computer simulations to recreate the night sky as it would have appeared in 3000 BCE, 4000 BCE, even 10,000 BCE. What they found was kind of wild. Some constellation boundaries described in the mall. Pinned tablets actually fit the sky from 6,000 or 8,000 years ago better than the sky in 1000 BCE, when those tablets were written down. Why does that matter? Precession. Earth's axis wobbles slowly over time, which makes the positions of stars creep across the sky over centuries. A constellation sitting at a particular spot in 3000 BCE won't be in that same spot by 1000 BCE. So, when ancient tablets record star positions that line up with much older skis, it suggests those observations came from way back, then just got copied and recopied by later scribes, even when the stars had drifted somewhere else. That's not just record-keeping, it's knowledge inheritance. They kept things accurate by copying everything exactly, not by updating it. You do that when you don't really understand the system you're preserving, when the information feels sacred, untouchable, something handed down by the gods, not to be changed by anyone. If those scribes were copying Anunnaki star tables, they'd preserve every detail, even if thousands of years went by and the sky itself had moved on. But the strangest thing about Mesopotamian astronomy isn't just this careful copying. It's that some of their knowledge points to things nobody could see with the naked eye, stuff you shouldn't know without a telescope. I'm talking about the outer planets. In their cosmology, the Sumerians drew out the solar system. You can spot it in cylinder seals, temple carvings, and their astronomical texts. The usual explanation is that they showed the sun, the moon, and the 5 planets you can see without a telescope: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. But sometimes the art shows more. Weirdly, there are depictions with extra spheres, arranged in ways that still puzzle researchers. Take the famous cylinder seal VA-243, now in the Berlin Museum. There's a central sun-like star surrounded by 11 spheres, one of which is obviously the moon thanks to its crescent. So if the middle is the sun and one is the moon, that leaves 10 other objects: Earth, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and 4 more. If you look at it with modern eyes, you might scratch your head. Our solar system has 8 planets now, thanks Pluto for getting demoted in 2006. But for most of history, people only knew about 6 planets: Earth, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Uranus showed up in 1781, Neptune in 1846, Pluto in 1930. So how did a Sumerian artist in 2500 BCE sketch out more planets than anyone could see? Zecharia Sitchin ran with this idea. He argued that the Sumerians got their knowledge from the Anunnaki, who supposedly came from somewhere else in the solar system and knew its whole layout. Sitchin even claimed there was a mystery planet, Nibiru, the Anunnaki homeworld, a giant planet on an eccentric orbit that takes it way out past the other planets before swinging back toward the sun every few thousand years. Mainstream astronomers haven't found Nibiru. There's no evidence for it, and the math doesn't work. Nothing with that kind of orbit could just hang around the solar system unnoticed. Still, the basic mystery remains. Sumerian art sometimes shows more solar system bodies than they should have known about. Maybe the artists were just filling in mythological blanks, inventing cosmic objects to round out their stories. Or maybe, somehow, they were recording information from a source that had a wider view than anyone on Earth. Then there's Planet 9. In 2016, Caltech astronomers suggested there could be a massive, distant planet lurking in the outer solar system, something big enough to tug on the orbits of icy bodies far beyond Neptune. If it exists, it's huge, several times more massive than Earth, and so far away you never spot it without a powerful telescope. The search is still on, but this idea shows we might not have found everything out there yet. Maybe there are still secrets in the darkness, waiting for us to notice them. Maybe even secrets the ancients hinted at, long before we had the tools to see. The Sumerians tracked time on a scale that just seems wild for a civilization that, on paper, only lasted a few thousand years. They used this unit called the Shar, 600 years, which pops up everywhere in their records. Some people think the SHAR connects to Nibiru's supposed orbit, though that idea is pretty shaky. Others point out that if you divide the length of the precession cycle, about 25,920 years, by 7.2, you land right at 3,600. Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. But honestly, it doesn't matter exactly what the SHAR stood for. What's fascinating is that the Sumerians worked with time spans way longer than their own civilization had existed. They tracked cycles that take thousands of years to play out. That's not something you figure out just by watching the sky for a generation or two. Either they got this info from cultures that kept records for millennia, or someone handed them the math, already worked out. Take the Great Year, 25,920 years for the sun to wobble all the way around the zodiac, thanks to precession. Ancient systems split this up into 12 ages, each lasting 2,160 years, the time it takes the spring equinox to drift through one zodiac sign. The Sumerians mapped the zodiac, named the constellations, and drew the boundaries we mostly still use today. And they knew those constellations would shift. The age of Taurus would become the age of Aries, then Pisces, then Aquarius, and so on. But how did they know this? Precession is a really slow process. You can only spot it by comparing star positions over generations, noticing tiny shifts, and then working out the math. You need careful records and a lot of patience. Yet the Sumerians built this idea right into their calendars and myths. They saw themselves as living at a specific moment in a gigantic cosmic cycle. Then there's the Sphinx at Giza. It stares due east, straight at the sunrise. Because it's shaped like a lion, some folks think it was carved in the age of Leo, around 10,500 BCE, when Leo greeted the sun at the spring equinox. If that's true, the Sphinx is 7,000 years older than the usual story claims. Back then, mainstream archaeology says people were just hunter-gatherers. No cities, no stone carving, nothing like the Sphinx. Yet there it is, cut deep into limestone, weathered in ways that hint at an age much older than 4,500 years. Its alignment only makes sense if it was built to mark the age of Leo, a kind of giant clock. So who built it? Did the Anunnaki carve the Sphinx? Did they raise the pyramids or teach humans to do it as a way to lock away advanced knowledge about astronomy and the cycles of time? In the 1990s, Robert Bovell pointed out something wild. The three pyramids at Giza line up with the three stars of Orion's belt, not as they looked in 2500 BCE, when the pyramids were supposedly built, but as they appeared around 10,500 BCE. His Orion correlation theory suggests the whole Giza complex was laid out according to a much older blueprint, and the Egyptians just followed a master plan handed down from somewhere else. The ancient Egyptians even said as much. They claimed they were restoring what the gods, the Neteru, had built during Zep-Tepi the first time. Later Egyptians just repaired and copied what was already there. The Sumerians told a similar story. Their civilization was a restoration, their knowledge a gift, the foundations laid by those who came before. So if both cultures inherited this knowledge, the real question is, who gave it to them? The texts call them Anunnaki, Neteru, sky gods, beings from the heavens. For centuries, people brushed this off as myth, just old stories to explain things they couldn't understand. But the records are there, and they keep pointing back again and again to some lost teachers who knew the cosmos inside and out. But what if they really were just telling us what they saw, the way they understood it? Imagine a time when beings with a head start in astronomy, people who had the gear, who understood how the solar system worked, walked the earth. Maybe they taught us, shaped our earliest cities, built monuments to pass on what they knew, and then vanished, leaving us to look after what they'd made. We don't have proof for this story. Still, the facts are weird. Ancient people had sky knowledge they shouldn't have had. Some monuments hide details that needed sharp eyes or strange tools to see. And both the Mesopotamians and Egyptians swore up and down that they got their wisdom from older, more advanced beings. Maybe somewhere under the ruins of Eridu, in the sand-drowned corners of Giza, or locked away inside Baalbek's hidden rooms, we'll find something that finally tips the scales. Real tools for watching the stars, gadgets that tracked planets, records that mapped the solar system before we even had telescopes, proof that we got a helping hand, that civilization was a gift, that the Anunnaki were more than a story. Right now, all we can do is wonder. We drift off, haunted by questions that have been following us since the first clay tablet was cracked open, since the first time someone actually read a hieroglyph, since that first stunned moment researchers realized some monuments just don't make sense. The same question keeps bouncing through the ruins. Who knew? How did they know? And what's still out there waiting? The moon climbs above the Mesopotamian desert, throwing long shadows over toppled walls and sand-choked hills. In that pale light, the past feels right there, close enough to reach out and grab, if only we dare dig deeper, look past the obvious, admit that history might be far stranger than we ever guessed. As we fall towards sleep, where dreams blur into questions and questions blur into answers, maybe the real point isn't about finding some ancient gadget or lost machine. It's about figuring out our own story, where we actually came from, how we learned what we know, and whether we've been alone on this road or guided by hands we barely remember. Maybe those fingerprints are still pressed into clay tablets, carved into stone, hidden in knowledge we've wrestled with for 5,000 years. Somewhere in the British Museum, in those perfectly controlled rooms where they guard the old treasures against time. Thousands of Mesopotamian tablets are still waiting. Most are cataloged, photographed, boxed up. But the real detective work, reading, translating, making sense of them, takes years. It needs specialists who can wrangle dead languages, experts who sweat over the tiniest details in Sumerian and Akkadian, people willing to spend their lives on documents that might turn out to be nothing but tax forms or records of a land sale. Every now and then, though, something strange pops up. Back in 2015, someone was translating old tablets from Sippar, a Babylonian city, and stumbled on a text about something called the House of the Great Instruments. This was a real place in the city, almost 4,000 years ago. The tablet listed the stuff inside: the bronze boxes that sing, the stones that hold light, the rods of heaven, the seeing circles. These descriptions are maddeningly vague, and it's easy to get lost between ancient Akkadian and modern English. Maybe we're missing the point, but these lines hint at tools, not decorations, real objects that did things. Bronze boxes that sing. Sure, maybe they were musical instruments, but what if they were devices that made sound, that vibrated or hummed? Stones that hold light, crystals, gems, or maybe something stranger, materials that glowed or stored energy in ways we still can't explain. According to the tablet, the House of the Great Instruments was destroyed in a war with a rival city. The writer mourns this loss, saying the knowledge returned to the heavens. Whatever those instruments were, they held secrets that couldn't be rebuilt. The know-how was gone, or maybe it was never fully ours to begin with. You see this pattern over and over again. Ancient people don't call themselves inventors or creators. They say they're caretakers, just keeping alive what was handed down. They talk about following instructions from long-gone teachers, doing their best to maintain these old systems. But always, there's this nagging feeling of loss, like something important slipped through their fingers. Each generation holds on to less than the last, until all that's left are fragments. Copies of copies, fatting a little more each time, until the original turns into a legend, and the legend fades into myth. In 2019, a research team tried out multispectral imaging on some battered cuneiform tablets. Suddenly, words appeared, lines that regular photography had missed, either worn away by time or maybe even scraped out on purpose. But faint traces hung on, pressed into the clay. Among the newly visible text, they found a few references to the departing, a time when the Anunnaki left Earth. Supposedly, they took most of their works with them, but sealed a few things away in special places of waiting. The texts don't talk about a sudden disappearance. The Anunnaki pulled back slowly, shutting down their sites, taking away what they thought was dangerous, setting aside what they figured humans might be ready for someday. They left behind instructions, hidden in monuments, etched into tablets, clues meant to guide people to these hidden caches when the time was right and civilization could handle it. You see this idea all over the place in ancient writings. The Egyptian Hermetica, for example, mentions secret chambers under the Sphinx, supposedly packed with divine knowledge, only to be opened when people can handle it without destroying themselves. The Mayan prophecies talk about Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, returning when the calendar cycles line up and humanity shows it's ready for some higher wisdom. Hindu texts tell of ages when the Devas come back to teach, to restore what got lost during dark times. It's the same setup every time. Some advanced beings come and teach us, then leave. They build monuments, stash away knowledge or technology, and say they'll come back, or that their secrets will reveal themselves when we finally grow up. It's a test, basically. A cosmic exam where we have to show enough wisdom, enough tech skills, and enough ethical sense to be trusted with what's hidden under the old ruins. So, are we there yet? In some ways, sure. We've split the atom, mapped the genome, sent probes past Pluto. To the ancients, we'd look like gods, but in other ways, we haven't grown up at all. We're still fighting, trashing the planet, barely able to handle the tech we already have without screwing things up. Maybe that's why those secret chambers are still closed, why archaeologists run into strange setbacks, why governments lock down certain sites, why evidence sometimes disappears into private collections or gets classified. Maybe there's a part of our civilization, some shadowy institution, that knows we aren't ready, and that releasing proof of Anunnaki tech before we're mature enough would just end in disaster. Or maybe the chambers are just waiting for someone with enough curiosity, humility, and wisdom to look deeper, to ask the right questions, not just chase after treasure or power. Maybe the monuments themselves hold the answers, with their math, their precise geometry, their alignments to the stars, all of it like a code, pointing the way for anyone who learns how to read it. Back in the 1980s, physicist Paul Laviolette suggested that ancient monuments work like messages in a bottle. They're time capsules, but you only get the message once you reach a certain level of science. The Great Pyramid, for instance, encodes phi, the speed of light, the size of the Earth. You don't notice unless you measure and do the math. It's all hidden in plain sight, just waiting for someone advanced enough to catch on. Same goes for the star alignments at Giza, Angkor, Teotihuacan. They line up with specific dates way back 500 BCE, for example, marking some big event. Maybe that's not when the buildings went up, but when something happened. An arrival, a departure, a moment these places commemorate. And maybe, if you look at their positions, their angles, the distances between them, you'd find a map, a set of coordinates pointing straight to the underground chambers, still waiting for us to wake up and find them. Graham Hancock, a British researcher, has spent years chasing these connections. He's convinced that ancient sites across the globe are linked, a kind of hidden network preserving the wisdom of a lost civilization. He believes monuments on different continents all speak the same language, carrying messages meant to outlast catastrophe, meant to guide whoever comes next. Even if you don't buy all of Hancock's ideas, you can't ignore one thing. Ancient sites really do share some weirdly precise mathematical and astronomical links. It almost looks like they were built with the same blueprint, or at least by people trading notes. If those notes came from the Anunnaki, or whoever those old myths are remembering, then these monuments are clues, breadcrumbs scattered across the world, pointing back to when knowledge first appeared. Somewhere, while most of us sleep and the stars do their slow drift overhead, researchers in places like Iraq, Egypt, Lebanon, and Peru keep hunting. They run ground-penetrating radar over the Earth, analyze the minerals in ancient stones, translate old tablets, and measure monument alignments down to the millimeter with lasers. Sometimes, they find something that just doesn't fit, something that makes you wonder if those old stories were closer to the truth than we've been comfortable admitting. But you almost never hear about these finds. They show up in dense academic journals, at tiny conferences, in research circles most people never even hear about. Still, the evidence keeps piling up, one odd discovery after another, suggesting that ancient people knew things we still struggle to explain, that their knowledge might have come from sources we now call myth, just so we don't have to deal with what it all means. What happens if we stop shrugging all this off and actually start digging deeper? Imagine governments opening up every part of Giza or Eridu, letting researchers go as far down as the tunnels go, into chambers sealed before anyone wrote anything down. What would we find? Maybe the Sumerian tablets would finally give up their secrets. Maybe we'd see exactly what the Anunnaki made, the tools they used, the devices they left behind. Maybe we'd have proof that we weren't self-taught, that civilization was a gift, that our story started with someone teaching us, someone whose abilities dwarfed ours until just recently. And if that proof turned up, say, tomorrow, if someone in Mesopotamia broke into a chamber full of ancient machines that still worked, that produced energy or bent matter or did things we're only now figuring out, how would we react? How would it change the way we see ourselves, our origins, what we might become? Maybe that's the real test. Could we handle a discovery that big without blowing ourselves up? Could we accept that we're not the end of the line, but just students, still learning from what the Anunnaki left? Could we use that knowledge wisely? Or would we repeat all the old mistakes with new, even more dangerous tools? Tonight, the desert wind moves across Mesopotamia just like it always has. It lifts sand, covers things, uncovers them, buries and reveals. Under all that wind and sand and time, the evidence waits. Not for heroes, not for the chosen, just for people willing to listen, patient enough to search, smart enough to see the truth when it finally comes out of the dark. As we drift off, as sleep pulls us under and questions fade for a while, the search goes on. There are still researchers out there who won't give up. The monuments still stand, still pointing towards something we're on the edge of remembering. The tablets wait, untranslated in dusty archives. Maybe there are still chambers, sealed and silent, holding onto the last pieces of the puzzle. The Anunnaki's legacy, call it technology, knowledge, or just a reminder of what civilization can be, still exists somewhere, waiting for us to be ready. And in that quiet space between waking and sleep, when the world is hushed and dreams take over, maybe we can still catch their voices, whispering from the ruins. Don't give up, they say. Don't stop searching. Don't settle for easy answers when the truth is so much stranger, so much more amazing, and maybe a lot closer than we think. The wind carries that old whisper across deserts, over oceans, through all those years that stand between us and them. And maybe tonight in our dreams we'll finally remember what we were told to forget. We were never alone. We were always students. The technology we're searching for isn't gone. It's just waiting, hidden but unharmed, sleeping but not lost, ready to wake up when we show we're worthy of the inheritance the Anunnaki left us. It's buried deep under the sands of Mesopotamia, safe in the dark, waiting with the patience of stone for the moment we finally make our way back to the truth. Go ahead, sleep. Dream of locked rooms cracking open, light flickering on after 10,000 years of shadow, lost knowledge flooding back, and humanity finally seeing its own story. Imagine the past and future colliding right now, in this strange present, where all the old facts melt away and something bigger, stranger, and far more beautiful takes their place. Something true, so much truer than those simple stories we've been clinging to for ages. That technology, the Anunnaki's legacy, waits under the ruins. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe we'll see it in our lifetime. Maybe we're the ones who finally dig deep enough, ask the right questions, and open doors that have been locked since before anyone remembers. Since before civilization, since the first teachers came down from the sky and decided we were ready for knowledge, for help, for a legacy that would last until the day we finally understood what we'd been given. So dream well, rest easy, and just know that somewhere under that desert, beneath all the silence and the weight of ages, the truth is waiting. It's patient. It's ready to shine again, to remind us we've always been more than we ever believed, always part of a story bigger than anything we could invent, always the heirs to wonders we're just starting to remember. The night gets deeper, the stars spin overhead, and far below Mesopotamia in those closed, silent chambers, the legacy sleeps, just waiting for the day we finally find it and realize we were never meant to walk this path alone.